Okay, welcome to the last week in the book of Deuteronomy. And so we are going to go through chapters 31 through 34 this evening. And there's going to be some songs and some blessings. And I'm not going to sing the songs because I don't know the tunes to these ancient Hebrew songs. Kind of like if you ever read Tolkien, there's a lot of songs in the Lord of the Rings books. And I've never understood how anybody knows what the actual tune is. And then like the Hobbit movie came out and they were actually singing the songs to the tune. And I was like, how do you know? And that's how I feel about the tune of these songs. Like they're a song, but how do we know how they go? So I'm not even going to try. But this is the last words for Moses before he passes away. And so there's transition to Joshua as the leader, and then those blessings, and then we read about Moses' death. So chapter 31, let's jump in and learn from this great book. Then Moses went out and spoke these words to all Israel. I am now 120 years old, and I am no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy these nations before you and will take possession of their land. Joshua also will cross over ahead of you, as the Lord said, and the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, whom he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it among them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. So Moses is 120 years old. That's old, okay? And in Moses's age is something that people debate. Is he really 120? But one of the key pieces as we look at Moses's life is he had 40 years before he was called, 40 years before he left after killing the man in Egypt and left to Midian, and then 40 years in Midian, and then 40 years as the man that God would use to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt and to the wilderness. And so his life breaks up into these three eras. And so each of those eras being 40 years is significant. But this is, one of the simple reading of scripture is usually the best reading. It is not impossible for people to live to be 120 years. Even now, it is rare, but Moses is also a rare person and was the Lord lengthening his life as a way of honoring him and ensuring that Israel had good leadership over these 40 years, maybe. But we also are told here, God told Moses that he's not going into the land, and so he has to transition the leadership. And so what he's saying here, first of all, is to the people of Israel, you are going to go into the land and you are going to conquer the land. But it's not you doing this in your own strength. The Lord goes before you. He will go and fight battles before you even get there. And so part of this is a exhortation to faith, to trust the Lord that he's with you and ahead of you, but then also transferring that leadership over to Joshua, who was Moses' aide. And this transfer to Joshua was something that was initially indicated in the book of Numbers. Joshua was appointed to be an heir, the heir apparent for Moses as leader of the people of Israel. And even here we have this admonition to be be strong and courageous to the whole nation. And when we jump into Joshua, we will see that the angel of the Lord speaks directly to Joshua, a similar message. Be strong and courageous. I will go with you everywhere the sole of your foot touches, I will give to you. That's the message of the angel of the Lord to Joshua in particular. And so the people of Israel are challenged to not worry about the people in the land, to not be overwhelmed by the size of their armies, but to trust that the Lord is going with them. And let's remember why Moses couldn't go into the land. It was because of what he did at Meribah, where he struck the rock and water came out when the Lord instructed him to speak to the rock and water would come out. And so this disobedience was what the Lord said would keep Moses from entering the land. And it seems harsh to us today, but it is the Lord is sovereign, and Moses should have by now seen the faithfulness of the Lord and known to be able to do the thing that the Lord tells him to do. But also, like, the reason that Moses struck the rock was because of his anger at the people of Israel. And so it could be that the Lord is keeping Moses from going into the land because of Moses' own anger at God's people as well. So there's a couple different things going on there, but the Lord is with the people. And so now Moses is wrapping everything up. Joshua's going to take over. Let's talk about how we're going to operate in the land. And so the first thing that Moses wants them to do here, as they're concluding Moses' leadership, is in verse 9. So Moses wrote down this law and gave it to the Levitical priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. Then Moses commanded them. At the end of every 7 years, in the year for canceling debts during the festival of tabernacles, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, you shall read this law before them in their hearing. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the foreigners residing in your towns, so they can listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. Their children who do not know this law must hear it and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So part of the covenant making process in ancient times was the suzerain, the greater party, would actually have a written document of the covenant to give to the vassal, the lesser party. And so Moses, as a representative of the Lord, it says here, he wrote all the law out. He wrote the covenant with the people of Israel and the Lord, and he's now giving it to them. And to help the people in the covenant who are in the members of the covenant to remember the terms, there were regular readings of the covenants. So when a king would come and conquer a city, they would create a new covenant, and the people were to come and remember the covenant and the agreements and the stipulations of the new king. And so this is what the Lord is doing through Moses, is he's writing this covenant and he's giving it to the people. And so to help them remember, they are to read it out loud every 7 years. And it's interesting the way that it's all tied together, because the 7 years is the year of Jubilee, when debts are canceled, and slaves are set free. And that's also during the Feast of Tabernacles, which is when the people were living in tents and booths out in the world, out of their houses, to remember the time that they were wandering in the wilderness, which is also the time that the Lord established his covenant with the people who were slaves, and they were liberated by God. And so all of these things in the seventh year, remembering the covenant, remembering the freedom that God secured for the people while they were in the wilderness and his provision for them, all of this is intentional to use that 7 year as a reminder to say, look at what God has done, look at his faithfulness to us. And so it's not just like a random decision that the Lord made, but to say, like, no, every time you set people free from slavery, read the covenant again and pass it on to your generation after generation, because the children need to know and they need to hear the commands of the Lord And so, yeah, so as that was one of the most things I was most excited about in this whole section was like, oh, look at what God is doing here in his planning for the people to have a embodiment and a reading as all tied together to help them remember all that God has done. And so verse 15, the Lord said to Moses, now the day of your death is near. Call Joshua and present yourself at the tent of meeting where I will commission him. So Moses and Joshua came and presented themselves at the tent of meeting. Then the Lord appeared at the tent in a pillar of cloud, and the cloud stood over the entrance to the tent. And the Lord said to Moses, you are going to rest with your ancestors, and these people will soon prostitute themselves to foreign gods of the land they are entering. They will forsake me and break the covenant I made with them. And in that day, I will become angry with them and forsake them. I will hide my face from them, and they will be destroyed. Many disasters and calamities will come on them. And in that day, they will ask, have not these disasters come on us because our God is not with us? And I will certainly hide my face in that day because of all their wickedness in turning to other gods. Now, the Lord made this covenant, made this agreement with the people, but he knew the people would fail. And, I think that is an important thing for us to remember, that God still wants relationship with people who are imperfect and will disappoint him. Because he will also, as we read through the history of Israel, he will bring them back. He will restore them. And so God knows what's happening. He knows the story before it's played out, but he's not going to just totally abandon them. There will be a season where it will seem like he is far away. But even here, he's saying, I'm hiding my face from them so that they will learn to call out to him. Verse 19, now write down this song and teach it to the Israelites and have them sing it, that it may be a witness for me against them. When I have brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, the land I promised on oath to their ancestors, and when they eat their fill and thrive, they will turn to other gods and worship them, rejecting me and breaking my covenant. And when many disasters and calamities come on them, this song will testify against them because it will not be forgotten by their descendants. I know what they are disposed to do even before I bring them into the land I promised them on oath. So Moses wrote down this song that day and taught it to the Israelites. And the Lord gave this command to Joshua, son of Nun, be strong and courageous, for you will bring the Israelites into the land I promised them on oath, and I myself will be with you. And so like I said, the Lord knows what's coming, but he wants them to remember that he knows. And that's one of the reasons, and we'll see the song in just a minute. But there's a lot of setup for the song. So this idea of calling witnesses against the people is also significant because the Lord is the greatest being in the universe. And so there are no other witnesses greater than him. And so they are like, the Lord himself is going to call on creation to say, these are the next greatest things to bear witness to the covenant that I'm making with you. But he wants them to also know, like, the Lord knows the hearts of the people. And so he is putting this all ahead of them entering into the covenant, into the land of promise, because he wants them to not be surprised, because the Lord himself is not surprised. Verse 24, after Moses finished writing the book of the words of the law from beginning to end, he gave this command to the Levites who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Take this book of the law and place it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God. There it will remain as a witness against you, for I know how rebellious and stiff-necked you are. If you have been rebellious against the Lord while I am still alive with you, how much more will you rebel after I die? Assemble before me all the elders of your tribes and your officials, so that I can speak these words in the hearing and call the heavens and earth to testify against them. For I know that after my death, you are sure to become utterly corrupt and turn from the way I have commanded you. In days to come, disaster will fall on you because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord and arouse his anger by what your hands have made. And so here Moses writes it all out and he gives it to the Levites to say, put it right in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And remember, inside the Ark of the Covenant, we have the original tablets with the 10 commandments on it. We have the Aaron's staff and a jar of manna. That's what's inside the Ark. But this whole book of the law of the covenant is supposed to be just right in front of the ark so that the people can access it, so they can go and read it. and bring it to the people. And the law is something that is accessible to them. Like we talked about last week, it's not that it's some mystery far away, but the Lord came close, and his law is here for the people. And so, so God is trying to set them up for success, even though the Lord knows the hearts of people is prone, they're prone to wander. And so verse 30 and then into chapter 32. And Moses recited the words of the song from beginning to end in the hearing of the whole assembly of Israel. And this is the song, and I'll stop in a couple different spots to mention a few things. Listen, you heavens, and I will speak. Hear, you earth, the words of my mouth. Let the teaching fall like rain, and my words descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. He is the rock. His works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong. Upright and just is he. They are corrupt and not his children. To their shame, they are a warped and crooked generation. Is this the way you repay the Lord, you foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father, your creator, who made you and formed you? So here we're given these images of the word of God coming like rain, which covers the land and brings refreshment, brings cleansing. And these words that Moses is speaking on behalf of the Lord are intended to do that. We also are given this metaphor of the Lord as our rock. He's our steady foundation. He's strong. His works are perfect. And he has raised up this nation. But they are corrupt, they are foolish, and he calls them a warped and crooked generation. And so these images are intended to help the people be in the right place, to recognize that they are not God. They are not the greater party in this covenant. The Lord alone is king, and he will be faithful even in the midst of their iniquity and unfaithfulness. Chapter 7, remember the days of old. Consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will explain it to you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. In a desert land, he found him. In a barren and howling waste, he shielded him and cared for him. He guarded him as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them aloft. The Lord alone led him. No foreign God was with him. And so here the Lord is reminding the people that God divided up the nations. And we read this in, Genesis 11, the Lord spread people out after the Tower of Babel, and we get the Table of Nations. And after Genesis 11, we are introduced to Abraham, and we start the journey of forming the nation of Israel with Abraham. And so here the people are singing the song as a way to remember how God established the nation, that it's his will, and he alone is the one who can protect and provide for the Israelites. So his inheritance for them has been from the time of Abraham, the land of Canaan, the land they're about to possess. So even though other nations are in there now, the Lord's intention is for Israel to dwell in their inheritance. This has been God's plan moving forward. And so he has done the work to protect them, to lead them to this point. And so now even the victories that they win, this is all because of the Lord's doing on their behalf. Verse 13, he made him ride on the heights of the land and fed him with the fruit of the field. He nourished him with honey. He, being the Lord, nourished him, being Israel, with honey from the rock, with oil from the flinty crag, with curds and milk from herd and flock, with the fattened lambs and goats, with choice rams of Bashan, and the finest kernels of wheat. You drank the foaming blood of the grape Jeshurun, which is another title for Israel. Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. Filled with food, they became heavy and sleek. They abandoned the God who made them. They rejected the rock, their savior. They made him jealous with their foreign gods. They angered him with the detestable idols they sacrificed to false gods, which are not God, gods they had not known, gods that recently appeared, gods your ancestors did not fear. You deserted the rock, your father who fathered you, and you forgot the God who gave you birth. And so all that the Lord has done, we see this wonderful picture of provision, of bounty, and strength and nurture that the people of Israel are experiencing from the Lord. And then we're contrasted with, but the people forgot him and abandoned him and went after other gods. And as we read the Bible, we need to recognize that there are other spiritual forces in the universe other than Yahweh. But Yahweh is the one true God, the creator of the universe. All these other lesser gods are fallen beings, they're angels, they're demons, they're all these things that people worship instead of the Lord. And so they are stealing the obedience of the people away from Yahweh towards themselves. And the Lord is saying, like, I know you're going to do this. And as they are making these sacrifices to demons, the Lord again is not surprised, and he is grieved, and his grief will lead to their punishment. And so I'm going to read a longer section talking about what the discipline for their disobedience will look like. First, I'm going to drink some water. The Lord saw this and rejected them because he was angered by his sons and daughters. I will hide my face from them, he said, and see what their end will be. For they are a perverse generation, children who are unfaithful, who made me jealous by what is no God, and angered me with their worthless idols. I will make them envious by those who are not a people. I will make them angry by a nation that has no understanding. For a fire will be kindled by my wrath, one that burns down to the realm of the dead below. It will devour the earth and its harvest and set afire the foundation of the mountains. I will heap calamities on them and spend my arrows against them. I will send wasting famine against them, consuming pestilence and deadly plague. I will send against them the fangs of wild beasts, the venom of vipers that glide in the dust in the street. The sword will make them childless in their homes. Terror will reign. The young men and the young women will perish. The infants and those with gray hair. I said I would scatter them and erase their name from human memory. But I dreaded the taunt of the enemy, lest the adversary misunderstand and say, our hand has triumphed. The Lord has not done all this. They are a nation without sense, talking about the enemies of God's people. They are a nation without sense. There is no discernment in them. If only they were wise and would understand this and discern what their end will be. How could one man chase 1,000 or two put 10,000 to flight unless their rock had sold them, unless the Lord had given them up? For their rock is not like our rock. As even our enemies concede, their vine comes from the vine of Sodom and from the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are filled with poison and their clusters with bitterness. Their wine is the venom of serpents, the deadly poison of cobras. Have I not kept this in reserve and sealed it in my vaults? It is mine to avenge. I will repay in due time. Their foot will slip. Their day of disaster is near, and their doom rushes upon them. So the Lord is saying there is a day coming when there will be discipline and punishment for the people of Israel who are abandoning the Lord. And it will not go well. It will be bad. It will be heartbreaking. And he will send other nations in who will think, look at our strength over the people of Israel. And but the Lord is saying even here, like, they don't understand that they are being used by Yahweh to accomplish his purposes. And so he says, it is mine to avenge. I will repay. That comes up again several times in the Old Testament, even in the New Testament, where the Lord is the one who is the ultimate arbiter of justice. And all these nations who think they are able to defeat God's people and take pride in their own strength, they are mistaken. And the Lord will humble them as well. Their doom, it says, rushes upon them. Because in verse 36, the Lord will vindicate his people and relent concerning his servants. When he sees their strength is gone and no one is left, slave or free, he will say, now where are their gods, lowercase g? The rock they took refuge in, the gods who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings. Let them rise up to help you. Let them give you shelter. See now that I myself am he. There is no God beside me. I put to death and I bring to life. I have wounded and I will heal. No one can deliver out of my hand. I lift my hand to heaven and solemnly swear, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand grasps it in judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, the head of the enemy leaders. Rejoice, you nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will take vengeance on his enemies and make atonement for his land and people. So here the Lord is saying, all these nations that are boasting, that are making a claim for their own strength, the Lord is saying, nah, that's not how it's going to work. Because the Lord will take the final action against the enemies of God's people, and he will liberate them and vindicate their defeats, and the Lord will ultimately be victorious. But sometimes the people needed to see how weak these false gods are before they're really ready to respond to the Lord's invitation of grace. In recovery movements, there's often the talk about hitting rock bottom. And, that rock bottom is not just a substance. That rock bottom could come from anything that we put our hope or try to find our comfort in that ultimately disappoints. And the Lord is saying, like, to the nation of Israel, you're going to hit rock bottom. But the Lord ultimately will be victorious. He will vindicate you. And so he's telling them all of this right before he's going to die. These are his last words, his last songs for the people to recognize the power and authority of God. And putting this in a song for the people is something that's important because people remember songs. And so it's one more way that they would be able to pass on God's truth is through song. And so, so that's part of the reason why this is in a song. Verse 44, Moses came with Joshua, son of Nun, and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people. When Moses finished reciting all these words to all Israel, he said to them, take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared to you this day, so that you may command your children to obey carefully all the words of this law. They are not just idle words for you, they are your life. By them you will live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. So the word of God, the law of God, his commands, they're not just things to know, they are things to live by. Years ago, we did an overview series on Deuteronomy, and the series was just called Path of Life, because that's what the law is supposed to be for the people of Israel. It's a path of God's blessing and the life that he wants them to live. And when we veer off that path, that's when we find ourselves in conflict with God, but also we find ourselves outside of his blessing. We find ourselves outside of his design for human flourishing. And so they are supposed to learn the law, obey the law, trust the law, know it inside and out, because they're not just idle words, they are your life. On that same day, verse 48, on that same day, the Lord told Moses, go up to the Abiram range of Mount Nebo in Moab, across from Jericho, and view Canaan, the land I am giving the Israelites as their own possession. There on the mountain that you have climbed, you will die and be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. This is because both of you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin. That's where Moses hit the rock, was at Meribah. And because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites, therefore you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving the people of Israel. So, so Moses, think about this. Moses is 120 years old, And the Lord says, now go climb a mountain. Pretty impressive. Go climb a mountain, and from that mountain you can see much of the land, and you'll see how good it is. But Moses, you will not go there, and you will be gathered to your people. And this is one of the ways that the ancient Hebrews talked about death, was being gathered to your father, gathered to your people. The idea of heaven and was not fully fleshed out in the Old Testament, but there was this idea of Sheol, which is the land of the dead. The righteous and unrighteous all went to the land of the dead. And as people understood the Lord's teaching more over time, that's later concept of heaven and hell were developed as well. But right now it's just Moses will die and he will go be gathered to his ancestors, to his fathers. And so that when you see that, gathered to your people, they're essentially talking about gathering to your ancestors who have passed already. And then this next section that we're going to look at is going to be Moses blessing the tribes, the same way Jacob at the end of Genesis blessed his sons. Moses is going to do this similar kind of blessing pronouncement over each of the tribes, and that's what chapter 33 is focused on. This is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, pronounced on the Israelites before his death. He said, "The Lord came from Sinai and dawned over them from Seir. He shone forth from Mount Paran. He came with the myriads of holy ones from the south, from the mountain slopes. Surely it is you who love the people. All the holy ones are in your hand. At your feet they all bow down, and from you receive instruction. The law that Moses gave us, the possession of the assembly of Jacob. He was king over Jeshurun when the leaders of the people assembled along with the tribes of Israel." And so here it's talking about how the Lord came to the people and drew them to himself. And when it's talking about these holy ones, I mean, there's a sense of some kind of like angelic force coming with the Lord to draw the people of Israel to him. And so then he starts blessing. Let Reuben live and not die, nor his people be few. And so it's a pretty generic blessing here. Live and don't die. And Reuben's tribe, the tribe of Reuben, never really excels as a nation. As far as we know, we never saw any prophets or judges or any kings come from the tribe of Reuben. So it's basically just like, keep going, Reuben, keep living. And then to Judah in verse 7, he said, Hear, Lord, the cry of Judah. Bring him to his people. With his own hands, he defends his cause. Oh, be his help against his foes. And this, interesting, is Judah means praise. And so what the verse translated is, Moses prayed that the Lord would hear the voice of praise from Judah. And Judah what's interesting as well here is what's missing is that, Judah will ultimately become the tribe that the monarchy is going to reside among. And Jacob's blessing to the tribe of Judah includes this idea of a future monarchy. But here it's really just focused on defense. With his own hands, he defends his cause. And so Judah will be a strong tribe and able to defend his cause against his foes. And so that's the prayer for the Lord, is to intervene for Judah. About Levi, he said in verse 8, your Thummim and Urim belong to you, faithful servant. Those are the dice-like things that were used to make decisions. And so this is part of the high priest role, is to, when they don't know what to do, to consult the Thummim and Urim, and to essentially say, Lord, this is your decision and we are your representatives. So they belong to you, to your faithful servant. You tested him at Massa. You contended with him at the waters of Meribah. He said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. He did not recognize his brothers or acknowledge his own children, but he watched over your word and guarded your covenant. He teaches your precepts to Jacob and your law to Israel. He offers incense before you and the whole burnt offering on your altar. Bless all his skills, Lord, and be pleased with the work of his hands. Strike down those who rise against him, his foes, till they rise no more. And so the priestly role here for the tribe of Levi is on display. Like they teach the people, they help them make the important decisions and judgments. But they are going to be scattered among the people. They also are noted for their zeal. When we look at the different events where the Lord used the nation of Levi, or the tribe of Levi, to drive out sinfulness, in particular with the Moabite women, the golden calf issue. Like the Levites were called to say, we need to get things back, make things right. And so they did not let family partiality keep them from following the Lord's command when called upon. About Benjamin, he said, verse 12, let the beloved of the Lord rest secure in him, for he shields him all day long, and the one the Lord loves rests between his shoulders. And Benjamin is a small tribe, and they're going to be basically protected by the tribe of Judah. They're like nestled into Judah, but God loves them, and they are protected by God. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So, and then to Joseph, he said, and Joseph has two tribes from his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. But the blessing focuses on Joseph first, because Joseph was a son of Jacob. About Joseph, he said, may the Lord bless his land with the precious dew from heaven above, and with the deep waters that lie below. With the best the sun brings forth, and the finest the moon can yield, with the choicest gifts in the ancient mountains and the fruitfulness of the everlasting hills, with the best gifts from the earth in its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the burning bush. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. In majesty, he is like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox. With them, he will gore the nations, even those at the ends of the earth. Such are the 10,000s of Ephraim, such are the thousands of Manasseh. And so here, the blessing is essentially like Jacob lavishing blessing on Joseph before his brother sold him into slavery. That's the kind of blessing that Moses is pronouncing on Ephraim and Manasseh. Like, these are blessings that Joseph would receive from his father. Now the Father God is being called upon to bless Manasseh and Ephraim in a similar way, with all these images of refreshment and bounty in the harvest, and the strength among the people as like a firstborn bull. They're strong and they're healthy, and so that's the blessing for Ephraim and Manasseh. And then in verse 18, we get Zebulun. About Zebulun, he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and you, Issachar, in your tents. And so we get both of them in one blessing here. They will summon people to the mountains, and there offer the sacrifices of the righteous. They will feast on the abundance of the seas, on the treasures hidden in the sand. And this blessing also kind of looks at where Zebulun and Issachar are going to be. And so they're going to be kind of accessible to water. And so there's going to be great blessing and bounty there as well. And so as they travel, as they go in, as they come out, the Lord is saying, like, or the blessing for the Zebulun and Issachar is that they will be able to rejoice in the Lord and worship him for his faithfulness. So then about Gad in verse 20, about Gad, he said, blessed is he who enlarges Gad's domain. Gad lives there like a lion, tearing at the arm or head. He chose the best land for himself. The leader's portion was kept for him. When the heads of the people assembled, he carried out the Lord's righteous call. Wait a second. Yeah, that's right. He carried out the Lord's righteous. Where am I? Lord's righteous will. Sorry, I got get lost, and his judgments concerning Israel. And this one is kind of not, the translation is kind of unclear because who enlarges Gad, that's a little confusing. So it may refer to Yahweh, which is essentially is called to bless Yahweh rather than a tribe, but it could also be a statement that all who help Gad will prosper and be blessed. So when people come alongside Gad, they are also going to see a blessing that comes their way as they bless this other tribe. And then about Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's cub springing out of Bashan. And this is an area in the upper east of the Sea of Galilee. And Dan's territory was originally up there by was originally by the Philistine coast, but they moved up to Galilee. And so this lion's cub springing out of this region. Some of these blessings are still things that people are working through. About Naphtali, he said, Naphtali is abounding with the favor of the Lord and is full of his blessing. He will inherit this southward to the lake. And satisfied with favor it sounds good and it sounds refreshing. It sounds wonderful. And again, it's just basically saying you are blessed in all things. And when we look at this, Moses is kind of echoing Jacob's blessing, because the full blessing of the Lord, this is a good word. And in Genesis 49:21, the blessing that Jacob gives to Naphtali is he gives goodly words. He gives blessed words, is what Naphtali does. About Asher, he said, verse 24, most blessed of sons is Asher. Let him be favored by his brothers. Let him bathe his feet in oil. The bolts of your gates will be iron and bronze, and your strength will equal your days. And so this is an image of blessing in prosperity. People washing your feet was something that it was an act of hospitality, and most people just use water to wash feet. But then there would also be times where you would anoint people's feet with oil, and oil might have a fragrance, like a perfume in it for this purpose. But that would be very costly and expensive. And so here when it says, let him bathe his feet in oil, the blessing is like, there will be prosperity with the people of Asher. So they will be blessed. And then the blessing comes back to focusing on the Lord on behalf of the people. In verse 26, there is no one like the God of Jeshurun, which again is another title for Israel, who rides across the heavens to help you on the clouds in his majesty. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will drive out your enemies before you, saying, destroy them. So Israel must live in safety. Jacob will dwell secure in the land of grain and new wine, where the heavens drop dew. Blessed are you, Israel. Who is like you? A people saved by the Lord. He is your shield and helper, and your glorious sword. Your enemies will cower before you, and you will tread on their heights. And so as he's gone through this list of blessings, the final thing that Moses wants the people to remember is that God is their security. God is their refuge. He fights their battles, which is where we started this evening. Like, he will go before you. And so trust the Lord and turn to him over and over again. And so those are the last words of Israel, from Moses to Israel. And chapter 34 then focuses on his death. And this is a chapter that Moses probably did not write because he was dead. When people say Moses wrote all of the Pentateuch, there are clearly sections that he did not write. And it's okay to acknowledge that Joshua wrote this down later, or another scribe at another time wrote this. That's okay. So chapter 34. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, this is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab. And the Lord had said, as the Lord had said, he buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, until the time of weeping and mourning was over. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to him and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh, and to all the officials into the whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of Israel. And so Moses is able to go and see the land. And like where we believe Mount Nebo to be, like you get a good vista of the land across the Jordan. But to be able to see as far as Moses is told to see here is a supernatural kind of gifting, like almost like a telescopic view of the land. It seems the Lord was giving to Moses, and like this is his final blessing. This is all the work that Moses did for these last 40 years with the people of Israel. Like this is it. This is what he's going to see. And something to remember here is Moses is probably grieved to not be able to go into the land a little bit, but the greater blessing is the faithfulness that he, even though he disobeyed the Lord at Meribah, he was still considered faithful to the Lord in so many other ways. And the Lord used him mightily for the season that he was leading the people. And sometimes there's things that we invest in and we build up and we pour our lives into where we're not going to see the final outcome of that effort. And that's okay. It's okay for servants of God to recognize that God's work is bigger than our lifetime. It's bigger than our influence. It's bigger than the seasons of ministry that the Lord leads us into and out of. But to be able to see what God is going to do is part of leading by vision of the Lord, is to say, like, I know God has a picture for what this nation could be. And that is a great blessing. And so Moses is blessed at the end of this passage to be able to see the land. Now he dies, and we're told that the Lord buried him somewhere, and no one knows where Moses was buried. And this is something that has created great mystery and conversation. And in the book of Jude in the New Testament, verse 9 talks about a dispute over the body of Moses. That's a part of the apocryphal tradition that we can read about in the intertestamental period of between the Old and New Testament. And people wrote about this document called two documents: the Assumption of Moses, which we don't know where any of the manuscripts are, but it is referred to in other documents, and the Testament of Moses, where we have a Latin manuscript as the earliest manuscript. But both of those talk about Moses ascending directly to heaven. In another instance, there is in where Jude talks about Michael, the archangel, contending with the devil to dispute over Moses' body. And one of the theories is that the devil wanted Moses' body to create a a false religion that the people would turn to Moses's body and venerate him. And then but the Lord took his body and hid his body so that they could not do that. And so Michael the archangel was used to secure the body of Moses. And it is interesting that we don't know where Moses' grave is, but later on in the book of Revelation, we do have these two figures that show up, these two final witnesses in Revelation, and they are essentially Moses and Elijah. And Moses and Elijah both have mysteries around the end of their lives, because Moses, God buries, we don't know where he's at. Elijah, the Lord takes him up in a fiery in the fiery chariots to heaven. And so later on, we see with Jesus at the transfiguration, the two figures that Jesus is talking to on the Mount of Transfiguration are Moses and Elijah. And then in Revelation, we have those Moses and Elijah figures that are witnesses of the Lord. And so there's some kind of eschatological purpose, some kind of end times purpose that we could look to, but we can't know for sure what all of that is. But we just know that God is not done. We can know God is not done with Moses and Elijah, which I find fascinating. But what is he going to do? How's it going to all work out? I don't know. But I find it super interesting. And so Moses was 120 years old when he died, and Joshua was ready right there and filled with the Spirit and power to take over the leadership of the people of Israel. But it did not seem, when we jump into Joshua chapter 1, like he was like really excited about it. He was a little nervous, which is understandable as well. So that is Deuteronomy. We did it, guys. We have gone through the Pentateuch, which the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, which is no small task. And so thank you for sticking with us through this journey. And so are there any questions for these verses, these chapters in Deuteronomy, or for Deuteronomy as a whole? Maybe something we can review. But yeah, questions, thoughts?
So Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, they were part Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
Because his wife was like given to him from, I forget.
Pharaoh.
Potiphar's.
Yeah, Potiphar or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. So
they were looked at the same as the others, though.
Yeah, they were. They received direct blessings from Jacob, as well as all the other brothers in the last chapters of Genesis. So, yeah, Jacob elevated them, even though they were half Egyptian. So, but Jacob's children were all, they were all born from women from Mesopotamia. Right, so like the ethnic differences at that point there were several ethnic differences among the people, just because of the intermarriage between tribes and nations at that point. So, but they were all fully Jewish by this point, or fully Hebrew by this point is how Moses would consider them. So. Any other thoughts?
It sounds like the blessings of Moses kind of echoed the blessings of Jacob on his kids.
Some of them do.
Okay.
Some of them do. Some of Jacob's blessings are like, I don't trust that guy. So like his blessings on Simeon and Levi in particular are like, don't get too close to them. They'll hurt you. So, yeah. So blessings. It's kind of like just like when somebody writes final words to their family, and like this was written with like just the greatest sense of spite in a will reading. Like there's some of that in Jacob's blessings. We're like, wow, this is what you want to leave him with. All right. So, so Moses's are generally nicer. So, yeah. Any other thoughts? All right, you guys. I love this book. I think it is super interesting. And so there's times to go back to it, and I know it is repetitive in different parts. Even tonight we read like, and Joshua's there, and Joshua's called up, and like there's this consistent transfer of authority to Joshua throughout. There's those repetitive elements, but this crystallization of the law, and there's these expectations of God's continued work on behalf of the people of Israel. It's a very interesting book. And so, yeah, and there's speculation on Moses's authorship, and people like believing, that we can have confidence that Moses wrote a great deal of this, but there are some sections where it's like, this really sounds like it was added in later by an editor after the exile. And I didn't really get into that throughout this whole session with Deuteronomy, just because sometimes it can be a little distracting. But, this last chapter, Moses didn't write it, and, because he died. And so somebody else wrote it. And so like we can be okay with recognizing that there were some editors in the Pentateuch who were maybe bringing more clarity and understanding to a text, and also people who like maybe after the exile, which is hundreds of years after this, trying to make sense of the experience of the people of Israel that went through this incredible hardship, but then the Lord rescued them. And there's a tradition in Hebrew writing called midrash, where rabbis will write in the margins of documents, and like it's like a commentary where rabbis will write, and then other rabbis will respond to them. Like there may be some evidence of midrash becoming part of the text itself over time as people are having this conversation. And so yeah, it's just a very interesting book that is a gift to the people of Israel, but also a blessing to us as we see, again, the path of life that God called his people to walk. So, but if there are any other questions or comments, then I'm good to wrap here. And then the next couple weeks, let's take a break from group, because we're going to start Joshua, and I'd like to start Joshua on a new group quarter, so that it's a good jumping on time for people if they want to join in on a new book, instead of a few weeks in to say like, yeah, we've already been talking about this for a while. And so the groups will start the first week of February, and so we'll come back on whatever day that is. My phone has my calendar on it, and I'm using my phone to record this. I can't really look right now. So, but I'll add that in the what's that?
I think it's third, isn't it?
Possibly.
If we're doing
We're
Wednesdays.
going off the first Wednesday in February. That's the second.
The
Oh.
second.
Yeah.
Okay.
First February. First Wednesday in February is the second.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll put that in the group report as well, and to just verify that. So if folks didn't join us today, they'll have that in the document. Yeah. So the next couple of weeks we'll take a little break. If you want to read ahead in Joshua, I'd encourage you to do that. Yeah, Joshua is another really interesting book for the first half, and then the second half is like, all right, distribution of land, fun. And then the last few chapters like, yes, choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And you're like, yeah, way to end on a high note, Joshua. So it'll be fun. So, all right, y'all, have a good night, and stay healthy, and be safe and be blessed.
You also.
All right.
Thank you.
God bless everyone.
Thank
I can-
you.
Good night.